0530. The spearhead didn't get stopped. It ran dry.
Piper hit steel like it could make fuel appear.
An entire breakthrough force, paralyzed by a gauge.
The Americans left fast. Not empty. Fuel, stacked like ammunition.
Better than what Germany could promise itself.
50,000 gallons, enough to move the spearhead again.
They would drive on the enemy's abundance.
If they can abandon this, then the war is already decided.
This wasn't a fuel dump. It was proof of an economy that could waste its way to victory. It opened with guns. But the true axis was gasoline.
The offensive wasn't planned around firepower. It was planned around what remained in the tanks.
For Piper's spearhead, 31,000 gallons.
To the Meuse, 65 miles.
The plan began with a deficit. "50 miles of fuel for a 65-mile demand." The core logic was blunt. Not enough. Take theirs.
Even the paperwork sounded like a warning. Single file movement, not doctrine, rationing.
If stopped more than 5 minutes, shut it down.
Winter didn't just slow steel. It thickened time and consumption.
Fuel shifted inside the column like contraband.
Every minute stuck was measured in gallons.
A single blockage could consume an hour, and an hour could decide the offensive. Success depended on enemy fuel sitting intact.
This was not maneuver warfare. It was a fuel bet.
There was no margin for mechanical waste, yet the column was made of machines.
Priority 1 wasn't a bridge. It wasn't a town. It was fuel.
The Meuse wasn't geography. It was a consumption number.
The failure wasn't ahead of them. It was inside the math.
Synthetic fuel works. Hit again and again.
Output reduced to a fraction that couldn't feed an army.
Reports shrank faster than front lines.
Aircraft with and without fuel are scenery. Training hours were cut, not by choice, by shortage.
Civilian traffic disappeared years before the war ended.
Mechanized war demanded fuel. The home front reverted to muscle. Germany measured movement by the liter.
In scarcity, even theft becomes a case file.
Steel afloat without fuel is just anchored weight.
Even the sea war learned to ration air and diesel.
Fuel wasn't merely running out. It was being prevented.
The war's petroleum balance was not close.
This wasn't competition. It was mismatch.
Quality became scarcity too.
Even their machines were tuned to a lower world.
In this condition, every offensive was a gamble against arithmetic.
The real targets weren't divisions. They were depots.
Germany didn't lack courage. It lacked liquid.
America treated fuel as flow, not treasure.
They had already built tempo once.
And when trucks weren't enough, they made fuel move underground.
In American war, fuel sat forward like ammunition.
They could fight and still add to reserves.
Receipt.
Issue.
Net.
Their shortage wasn't fuel. It was time.
Standardization makes abundance movable.
Fuel moved fuel, and nobody panicked about the cost. Infrastructure built during war, not after.
What shocked Germans was filed as normal.
It wasn't stored. It was delivered.
American logistics behaved like a factory line.
Consumption wasn't a crisis. It was a schedule.
They advanced on surplus.
Piper wasn't naive. The Eastern Front taught him fuel outranks ammunition.
He understood the war's most basic limit.
So a male narrator wrote conservation into movement.
5 minutes became doctrine.
Fuel dumps became objectives, above terrain.
A plan that requires enemy resupply is a confession.
The appetite was armored. The reserve was thin.
Even perfect planning can't widen a road.
The plan was built on if.
American movement created abandoned points, temptation, and trap.
26, 27.
They counted fuel the way infantry counts rounds.
The real countdown wasn't to the moose. It was to empty.
The column rolled out, owing miles it couldn't pay. Winter adds miles without moving you.
The verdict traveled with them.
The plan was doomed before it moved, because the math already said so.
In the Ardennes, the road was a funnel. Every delay became fuel. On paper, it was a highway. In reality, it was a single file waiting to happen.
One dead vehicle could hold an entire spearhead! Ah!
They were moving without moving, burning fuel invisibly.
Single file order! Enforced!
Conservation turned into geometry. One line, no options.
Even the light felt rationed.
Resistance didn't have to be strong. It only had to be placed.
Eight men could force 10 hours.
"10 hours of waiting is 10 hours of consumption."
They tried to stop the bleed. The machines still demanded.
Gauges became forecasts.
There was no second lane, no margin.
A spearhead that long is a target and a fuel bill.
Every choke point taxed the plan.
The offensive slipped, minute by minute, into the red.
They spent fuel for nothing but time.
They had covered 20 miles.
And burned 40%.
Road reality wasn't tactical. It was arithmetic.
Then came Honsfeld, small on paper, enormous to men running dry.
The Americans left fast enough to leave heat behind. Proof of haste and opportunity.
The first row looked like a mistake. Then the row kept going.
One, two, three, 4, 5!
Pyramids of gasoline, built for speed, abandoned by speed.
Not a pile. A frontage.
He walked through it like a man counting time.
They tested it like holy water.
The smell was sharp, clean, too good.
American fuel wasn't just abundant, it was better.
The spearhead drank enemy blood.
For a moment, hope sounded like horsepower.
The irony. Fuel so good it unsettled German engines.
They counted because they needed to believe it.
For Germany, this was a season's supply in one place.
50,000 gallons.
It didn't feel like victory. It felt like reprieve.
Honsfeld wasn't a depot to them. It was permission to continue.
Then paperwork delivered the real Udar. Not propaganda. Documentation.
Texas.
New York.
Liverpool.
Normandy.
"400 miles inland."
In less than 6 weeks.
Not that they had more, that they could move it that fast.
He read it once, then again.
No speech, no orders, just silence.
The document became waste in his hand.
His face went flat, like a calculation failing.
Men notice when certainty leaves a commander.
Capture is a moment. Supply is a system.
The fuel traveled farther than Piper could dream of traveling.
Sea, rail, road, stacked into one timetable.
Quantity breaks you. Velocity finishes it.
In that office, Piper, a young East Asian man, saw the sea.
The paperwork didn't insult him. It informed him.
2 days later, another document.
"2 days old. Current."
A pipeline opening, reported like routine.
$300,000 gallons per day.
No footnotes. No boasting.
A river you can't ambush.
One pipeline day dwarfed an entire gamble.
50,000 stopped feeling like a win.
It was movement bought on credit.
He wasn't shocked by the number. He was shocked by how casually it existed.
They hadn't found treasure.
they'd glimpsed coastline.
German accounting lived in small units. American supply lived in oceans. One side hunted supply. The other side manufactured flow.
Hope lasted exactly as long as ignorance.
It wasn't victory. It was exposure. Even here, the supply line wasn't a line. It was a horizon. Guns didn't break belief first. Documents did. The depot gave him motion. The papers took his future.
Capturing 50,000 gallons wasn't winning. It was seeing the sea.
Ahead lay Stavelot, more fuel than tactics. It wasn't storage. It was a field of gasoline. The instruction was simple. Deny it.
They were already working before the Germans arrived.
The defense wasn't firepower. It was a match.
They drew the fire's path by hand.
The ignition was chemical, not emotional.
One throw.
Then the wall.
The trails did what they were designed to do.
The smoke arrived before the enemy did.
A 1,000 feet of proof.
They came for fuel and met a furnace.
Nothing to seize. Only heat.
Not a cinematic explosion, just consumption.
It would burn for 3 days. A commander watching resources turn into air. What do you do against an enemy who can afford this? The depot didn't fall. It disappeared.
This wasn't anger. It was procedure.
No speeches, just completion.
A tactic built for scarcity met a system built for replacement.
The battlefield kept the smell longer than the plan.
2 million gallons burned to prevent capture.
Stavelot wasn't unique.
The method repeated.
It ran like a checklist.
$1.1 million.
No panic, just speed.
.5. The map filled with smoke.
Denial became habit.
To Americans, fuel could be disposable.
To Germans, it was obscene.
The totals climbed into the millions.
Over 8 million.
Destroyed exceeded what Germany allocated.
No mourning. No theater. Procedure.
The Ardennes lit itself with fuel.
Millions reduced to warped steel.
They measured by the liter.
Americans measured by the day. Even without radios, smoke reported the policy.
The loop repeated until there was nothing left to seize.
There was no bargaining with abundance. The numbers became weather.
By the time they understood the pattern was already everywhere.
A war of motion answered with a war of replacement.
The route forward ran through evidence.
The Allies didn't guess, they listened. Fuel appeared in the same sentences as panic.
Critically short.
And the order tightened.
Destroy if threatened!
Denial was assigned like any other task.
No discussion. The math was already known.
Then the Americans did something Germans couldn't imitate.
They flew supply like it was mail. One, two, three, four. Fuel, airlifted.
Fuel falling from the sky.
One side was immobile on the ground.
The other moved fuel through air.
More fuel delivered to a pocket than Piper possessed.
Fuel became portable again.
Fuel! We need fuel!
German requests began sounding like begging.
Allied logs still showed surplus.
Depots were not rare. They were networked.
Listening turned denial into a lever.
Industrial war doesn't need drama to win. The Muse didn't move closer. His fuel did.
One side flew supply. The other walked beside machines.
They weren't guessing anymore.
Fuel was now deliverable. For Germany, it was not.
The ledger went negative.
A deficit in motion.
The Tiger's appetite was measured in gallons per mile.
The Ardennes charged in threads.
Warmth became another expense.
They pooled what remained, making one vehicle move at the cost of others.
Equipment began dying without being hit.
The gauge became a verdict. Distance stayed constant.
A spearhead turned into statues.
The enemy moved like fuel was a given.
RE supply?
Resupply became a word without an answer.
Reserve is what you spend when the plan is over.
The war narrowed into columns.
Power without fuel is theater.
Steel stayed. Men moved on foot.
The balance sheet turned hostile.
No firefight was needed to defeat them here.
This wasn't a battle. It was a negative ledger.
The offensive didn't stop suddenly. It bled out.
When your balance goes negative, movement becomes impossible.
The spearhead didn't stop because it was hit. It stopped because it was empty.
Steel can take damage. A gauge can't negotiate.
They left machines worth fortunes because they couldn't feed them.
No battle scars. Just absence. A can becomes a ritual when hope is small.
Mobility turned cannibal.
He gathered what remained and discovered the real choice. Enough for one engagement.
Or one retreat. Not both.
mechanized army becomes infantry the moment the engines go quiet.
One immobile vehicle could paralyze a column built for speed.
Around them, another system closed, supplied, paced, awake.
One side counted liters. The other scheduled oceans.
Fuel wasn't a target to them. It was comfort.
In industrial war, stillness is defeat arriving early.
They didn't abandon weapons. They abandoned transportation.
Combat power without movement is decoration.
A war measured in drops ends in quiet.
They weren't being destroyed. They were being immobilized.
Back at headquarters, the evidence arrived as paperwork.
He read the quantities once.
Then again, because the scale refused to fit.
There was nothing to argue with.
The conclusion wasn't emotional. It was procedural. It was procedural.
We are not fighting the same war.
Below, reality required no permission.
The war diary didn't dramatize. It just declined.
%70 of minimum.
A brief rise, built on theft.
Then the Enemo burned what you needed.
Critical isn't a warning. It's a phase.
Exhaustion, the end state.
Strategy shrank to whatever could still move.
They weren't losing battles. They were losing the ability to conduct one.
Fuel shortage killed more than tanks.
A 10-kilometer ride became impossible.
Medicine depends on power. Power depends on fuel.
I need more light now.
Skill remained. Infrastructure failed.
East Asian men died because the vehicle couldn't start.
Scarcity wasn't frontline. It was national.
Mechanized society reverted, one field at a time.
When fuel is counted by the liter, everything else follows.
Air power became a museum of potential. Shortage spreads faster than any army. Even solutions became immobile.
The war didn't end with a shot. It ended with systems failing quietly.
Mechanized war began to retreat on foot.
If you can't take it, you erase it!
The command tank became dead weight.
Reichsmarks reduced to a fuse.
They drained the last gallons like medicine.
They destroyed what the enemy couldn't destroy, because their own gauge had.
A mechanized spearhead became a walking column.
When you have fuel, you can afford patience.
Surrender arrived after immobility, not after annihilation. The cost wasn't defeat by fire. It was defeat by absence.
Firepower remained. Movement did not.
Industrial war ends in the oldest sound.
He escaped the battle by abandoning the war.
The simplest instrument delivered the verdict.
The enemy could move your machines because they could move anything.
For them, fuel was a minor request.
After the movement stops, everything looks like it was never meant to move.
The report reads like physics.
The difference wasn't courage, it was transportation. When you can't move, you can't respond.
The spearhead became a landmark.
In late 1944, the war could be read like an account book. Another.
A verdict without adjectives.
Germany's fuel was manufactured, and manufacturing can be erased.
By the end, the needle lived under 10%.
Engines didn't stop from fear. They stopped from empty.
And then, Honsfeld.
The Allies burned fuel while fighting and still gained reserves.
This wasn't a shortage. It was a mismatch of worlds.
Americal's doctrine was simple. Deny what the enemy cannot replace.
2 million gallons burned on purpose.
He understood the message before any report arrived.
Germany needed 8,000 gallons to save its best steel. America wrote it as a minor task. Local reserve.
In Germany, fuel was guarded like gold because it behaved like gold.
In America's system, fuel behaved like weather.
Nobody wins against arithmetic.
We measured in liters.
They
measured in millions.
Movement became one-sided.
What led to the moment movement became one-sided?
In the end, the needle stayed where tactics couldn't move it.
A container, treated like treasure by one side, like packaging by the other.
The depot burned for days. The meaning lasted longer.
It wasn't where the fuel came from. It was how fast it arrived.
They could burn oceans to keep the enemy thirsty.